for me to become a lawyer was a big deal. And I'm a lawyer. I'm respectable. I'm a member of society. And in doing this work, you realize there's a lot of negative connotations that are associated with the work we do. And the lawyers that I know, like you, and so many others in our closely knit community, our goal is to do the best work we can for our clients and be noble and honorable in this profession we've chosen. And it's hard to get that across in sort of what we're seeing going on in terms of the type of advertising that is out there in the world and the war metaphors that are on billboards, the fight, all the aggressive fighting analogies we use or we hear used for trial work. I think it obscures what we really are supposed to be doing.
And what is it that we're really supposed to be doing?
We all want to say that we fight for our clients and we get them compensation, all of those things. But what we're really doing is we're giving them a voice and we're helping them tell their story so that there's some fairness.
Howdy, and welcome to the show. Cooper's Code focuses on legal issues and notable practitioners, distilling wisdom so we all achieve the best results for our clients. I'm Miles Cooper, and I'm excited to share part 3 of this conversation with Shaana Rahman. In the mentoring, training, feedback side, one of the other areas that I'm aware of you working on is in the Diversity Fellowship program with the San Francisco Trial Lawyers Association. Can you talk a little bit about what that was, what you started, and why?
It wasn't really me. It was a group of folks who started that program. When I got on the board of the San Francisco Trial Lawyers Association, I was asked to be on the diversity committee. And I said, why? It was kind of my first start of understanding that I was going to be asked to do things because I was looked differently than other people on that board. And but I took it on because it seemed worthwhile. But the diversity committee at that time was struggling with what to do, what the mission was, how to create something out of nothing, right? And so I worked with a couple of people, Sean Miller, Monique Olivier, and we decided that the best route would be to put together a program so that young lawyers could be encouraged to do this work, because that's what the organization was missing, was a pipeline. And I think we all had the same experience in law school, right? There wasn't, on-campus interviews and firms, they weren't plaintiffs' law firms doing this work. So that's how we developed the program to educate students that this was a potential, they could be happy here.
What does that program look like?
Well, it's been some years since I participated in the program. At the time, the program was a summer fellowship where the students got to rotate through several different law firms to see plaintiffs' attorneys in action, right? And so they basically got to shadow lawyers in trial and deposition, mediation, ask questions. Some of these students, a lot of them actually, these were the first lawyers they had ever known, much like me when I started out. So I think that was really powerful to create connections for law students in our community, because that is a very big part of breaking into any work, right? Having those connections.
As we talk about cases, and we talked a few minutes ago about your involvement in the cycling community, I know that you have had a case more recently that was significant in many ways, and significant in that it got a lot of media attention, significant in that it involved somebody who you knew very well. Can you help us understand a little bit about what the incident was?
I think this has been widely reported now, so I think people are familiar with the details, but Ethan Boyce was a very beloved cyclist in San Francisco and a beautiful person, and he was on a ride through the Presidio like he did so many times, and middle of the afternoon, and a driver misnegotiated a turn in the road and struck him and killed him.
My understanding is part of the reason, beyond just the awfulness of the event itself, was the accomplishments that Ethan had as a cyclist, being an international champion in his field, as well as the deep roots that he had in the community. Did you know him before the incident?
I did. Ethan was a friend. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the challenges involved in our work as far as that is concerned. I have to imagine this is not the first time that you have had a case where, because of either the injuries or the loss, it has been hard. How do you handle some of the day-to-day awfulness that our work entails?
I think to do this work well, it requires an amazing amount of empathy and the ability to listen to your clients and their families, right? Those are the two things we do, at least that I think are so important. And so you're taking in people's stories, their pain, the raw emotion in these situations. That's on the first level of the interaction. And then the second piece, we investigate cases. And so you are looking through people's medical records. You're looking at coroner's reports. You're viewing photographs. And you are taking in things that most people don't take in on a daily basis. So you're consuming content, if you will, that should be upsetting. And you have to let it be upsetting to you at a base level, right? Because if it's not upsetting, then you've become a robot. But at the same time, you have to be, you can't be emotional about your cases. So you are on a fact-finding mission. You're taking in information and you're figuring out a way to create your client's story from that information. Nobody wants a lawyer who's emotional and crying during their representation, right? People don't want that. So we are trained that that's not our role. It doesn't mean it doesn't affect us. So there is a balancing act between guarding your own personal feelings and not letting those spill over and affect your work. And I think a lot of lawyers struggle with that. And we all have our own coping mechanisms. Some of them good, some of them not so good. So, I take every case as it comes, and I take in the information in whatever form it comes. And if I find it affecting me, I sit with that, I recognize it, and then you do your job. But when it's someone and I don't often take cases where you have that relationship, but San Francisco is a small place. I've been here a long time. And so there's often, and because of the way I get my cases, which is mostly word of mouth referral, there is often some connection. And I think it's important, to recognize that connection, to understand that it's okay for you to have anguish about someone's, terrible event that occurred. And it fuels me, it gives you that piece of, righteous anger that sometimes you need to right the wrong. I think that's the only way to describe it.
Have you had many cases where there has been a parallel criminal component to the civil case?
I've had a handful of those cases over the years, sure.
For people who are facing that, or who may face that in the future, do you have any recommendations for how to navigate that world? I recognize that we're not a criminal prosecutor. We're not uh, in their court, the criminal courts, doing anything other than being stewards for our clients. And there's also concern about what's going on in this parallel track. How do you manage that?
Sure. I think one of the roles that we take on for our clients in these cases is an overall protector of the client, right? So you want, especially, in something where they've lost a family member, your job is to insulate them from the rest of the world that wants things from them and to try to shoulder that for them. And so when you have a criminal case and you're the civil lawyer, you might think, well, I'm a civil lawyer, so that doesn't have anything to do with me. But it absolutely has everything to do with you in the sense of your job is to continue to help those clients through that process. And so a good way to do that is to, make sure you have some communication with the prosecutor or the U.S. Attorney's Office or whatever entity is handling the criminal matter. And that really starts from the investigating officers onward, and decide what the family wants or what your client wants. Do they think this is something they want prosecuted? Do they want to go down that route? Because sometimes the victims, their wishes are instructive in these cases.
In these types of cases, have you had occasion where the prosecutor's office is less eager to speak to a civil lawyer?
I think it varies, certainly. And I always make it very clear that I have no agenda, except that I represent the family. They wish to convey this information. I offer it with the spirit of any information. Do with it what you will. But I don't ever have an agenda when I go in there. I think that's inappropriate.
Do you attend the criminal hearings with the family?
I do.
What benefit does that provide?
I think it provides them some comfort. I think anytime a client goes into a courtroom, something they're not familiar with, that's, you take a situation that's already fraught with emotion. It is scary. It's upsetting. And you add this other layer of a courtroom setting where they're not familiar. You're just trying to provide comfort and to, small things like bringing tissues, or this is where we sit, or this is what's going to happen now. I hope it provides some comfort to the families.
One other element that you had to address in the Ethan Boyce case was interaction with the media. And for those who don't have to do that on a regular basis, maybe they have one case in their life where this comes up. Do you have any recommendations for people on how to engage with the media in a way that is meaningful for your client?
Yes. One of the things that happens early on is that the media, especially now when people's information is so readily available, the media has a very easy time of finding phone numbers for your clients, for the family. And often that is where they'll go first. So it's important to prepare your clients that could happen and have a conversation with them, even though it's difficult, about how they want to handle that. This is in the same vein as being the protector of your clients, right? It is very difficult for families to field calls from reporters in the hours, days after they've lost someone. And so in those circumstances, we talk about it and they make a decision as to what information they want to give and who they want to be that messenger. And often they will ask me to speak to reporters on their behalf. And so something I do is I make sure I know who the reporters are. I look at their body of work and to assess whether or not that is someone who we want to speak to.
What kind of an evaluation are you making when you're looking at someone's background?
I'm looking to see if they are serious reporters. They do investigative journalism versus sensationalism or short pieces that have no real value, as opposed to, where they're just trying to take something tragic and use it for a flashy headline. I don't want to talk to reporters who are going to try to sensationalize my client's pain.
As you're dealing with a reporter, I know reporters will sometimes say, I this is off the record, I just want this on background. Are they, in your experience, trustworthy when they're giving that kind of information or statement to you in terms of how they're going to be gathering information?
In my experience, the reporters I've dealt with have been very good about that. If they are asking for something on background, or I want to give something on background, they honor that.
As you move into the point at which they're actually taking down information, are there things that you do to make sure that the information you provide is accurate, that your quotes are not taken out of context? Any other tips for the interview piece?
Well, you have to remember that everything you say that's on the record is going to be in that piece, right? And so the way you give information is very important. So you have to really understand what you're trying to convey and convey it in a way that can be taken down accurately. And sometimes, reiterate with the reporter, this is what I'm saying. And sometimes in a conversation, a reporter can kind of read back what you told them or go, circle back to it. And you want to make sure you're listening and say, no, that's not what I said. That's, let's get this right.
Any other tips that you have for people?
When the media is involved, I think it's important that you're not the story as the lawyer, right? This is not your marketing effort. This is not your moment to shine. You're acting as a messenger, as a protector of your clients. And so that should be at the forefront of your mind, right? That's your goal. That's your point.
As we talk about being the messenger for your client as opposed to being the central focus for your client, are there any trends that you have observed in our field over the last 5 to 10 years that you have found concerning?
I think for all the years that I've been a personal injury attorney, we have all fought against this perception, right? You go to a cocktail party and someone asks you, what do you do? And you tell them you're a trial lawyer, and they either walk away, or they roll their eyes in disgust, or they make a joke about ambulances, right?
As an alcoholic in recovery, I do not go to cocktail parties.
But you remember. And I always wanted to be in a respectable position, and for me to become a lawyer was a big deal. And I'm a lawyer. I'm respectable. I'm a member of society. And in doing this work, you realize there's a lot of negative connotations that are associated with the work we do. And the lawyers that I know, like you, and so many others in our closely knit community, our goal is to do the best work we can for our clients and, be noble and honorable in this profession we've chosen. And it's hard to get that across in sort of what we're seeing going on in terms of the type of advertising that is out there in the world, and the war metaphors that are on billboards, the fight, all the aggressive fighting analogies we use or we hear used for trial work. I think it obscures what we really are supposed to be doing.
And what is it that we're really supposed to be doing?
We all want to say that we fight for our clients, we get them compensation, all of those things. But what we're really doing is we're giving them a voice, and we're helping them tell their story so that there's some fairness. And that doesn't sound as powerful or sexy as some of the taglines that we hear. But at the end of the day, you're doing this work because you believe in it, right? And if you don't believe in it, then I don't think you can do your client justice.
As far as what can be done with that perception that may be based in part on some of the race to the bottom communications that some lawyers are putting out there, do you have any sense as to what we as a profession, personal injury lawyers ourselves, could be doing differently as far as that's concerned?
I think our conversations should be different, right? I think even now with colleagues that I'm closest to, the conversation always gravitates towards, what are you working on? How big a case is, how attention grabbing it is, all of those pieces. We rarely talk about our clients in the sense of the people we're representing and what's happened to them in a way that we would talk to non-lawyers, right? So our conversations are competitive. They are within this war paradigm.
I'm presuming that given where you have gotten and your successes in trial, that there is a competitive component to how you approach this.
Absolutely, right? If you're doing trial work, your goal is to win. For me, it's not winning for winning's sake. Winning means you did the best job you could for your client. I mean, sometimes losing means the same thing if you're going to trial, right? You have taken all the steps, you have done all the work, and you've let a jury decide. And those are the things you can do. But yeah, we want to win. That's right. And I think our profession is not different from many professions where winning is the goal. But I think sometimes we lose sight of what we're doing it for. It's funny, before I came on your show, I told a friend of mine, a lawyer, that I was coming on the show. And he said, well, why would you go on a competitor's podcast? And I said, well, I don't view Miles and I as competitors. It's like, but you do the exact same thing. And, yes, that's true. But I have so many friends. I mean, most of my friends are trial lawyers. And a lot of us do the exact same work. But I have never felt in our community that we were competitors or that it's a pie. And if you get this case, I don't get to eat. Like, I've never felt that. I feel like we have a community and we share. And I think it's important for us to have the outlets to have real discussions about how our work affects us and the goals that we're trying to achieve. And I think that's the real way you change our profession, right? That you surround yourself with excellent lawyers who are doing what you do for the reasons you're doing them.
It's interesting you had that feedback on the show. The main reason I do this is to continue my constant learning, meaning having the opportunity to sit down with very smart people on the other side and learn from them. And also be able to provide a platform in a world where we are more dispersed. There's just not that same engagement of walking through downtown and running into somebody and grabbing a cup of coffee and spitballing about a case. Podcasts are a great way for people to have an opportunity to get, a couple of hours of the brilliance of Shaana or Tom Brandy or Kevin Morrison, or I'm just listing some of the people who've recently been on.
I think that's right. I don't know. Part of the reason we do this, I think, is for that constant learning, right? Every case is a new opportunity to learn something, right? I've learned how to, pothole a road and, make sure a window is installed plumb and square. I've learned all kinds of things. And this is also part of it. What we get from our colleagues, nourishes us and helps us be better lawyers.
Now, if I remember, because I think you've talked about how to pothole a road, you lay down the material, you have a large square thing with a pole, and then you have a really big guy jump on it. That's the system, right?
Well, that is how it's done a lot of times, sadly.
Am I not wrong that this was a deposition that you took?
That's many depositions I've taken over the years in terms of, I can talk a lot about composite material and compaction. If you care to discuss
I would
that.
love to hear a little bit about composite material and compaction. Actually, this sounds like a granularity on dangerous conditions cases that probably has merit. So go.
I don't want to bore the entire podverse. Those are the kinds of things we learn, right? I know the rules for how to be a flag person on a road crew. I've learned that in an elementary school, there's a diagram of bathing suit areas where kids are taught not to touch in the bathing suit zone.
I've got kids. I don't know that.
You should talk to some school administrators on the record. There are diagrams. Yeah, there are all kinds of strange pieces of information I have taken in over the years, right, to help me understand how to do a case. I possibly could take apart an old-timey elevator. I don't know.
But could you put it back together again?
Probably not. But one of the best parts of this job is the constant learning. But, and learning from my colleagues has been one of the great pleasures of being in a community of lawyers.
In that learning department, have you learned different ways of communicating? And here I'm clumsily teeing up that we chatted a little bit before we started and off the record about voice. Do you have different voices that you use? Your Elizabeth Holmes voice and your non-Elizabeth Holmes voice?
I don't know why you would use that as an example.
I just like that example.
I know you do. I can imagine why.
Because she and I sound alike. Go on. Sorry.
I do find I have different voices. When I was in college, I did competitive debate, speech and debate. And one of the things that I was taught from my speech and debate coach was how to modulate your voice, right? And in that kind of competitive environment, we were reading evidence at fast rates of speed. That was the style in that format, which is not great storytelling, but is the way it was done. And if you started out speaking rapidly at a higher octave, by the time you got to the end, the octave was so high that no one could take down at the speed and the octave what you were saying. And so I was taught how to speak from the diaphragm and start speaking at an octave lower or two than I would normally speak. That was for this weird thing that I was doing, this fast talking debate. But what I found after that is that tone, speaking lower, actually helps command an audience for me. And so that's not normally how I speak when when you and I just chat. That's not my voice. My voice is higher than that. So you can probably hear variations of that throughout this podcast, right? But there are scientific literature about octaves and what the human ear can hear comfortably and what it prefers and all those different things. And so many people have talked about women's voices and are you shrill? Is your voice too high? All these things. And I don't know what the answer is to that. And there are a lot of components for why women aren't heard. So I don't know if we're going there, but for me, in terms of being able to project my voice, which I think is one of the most important things to do in a room, in a courtroom, especially where the acoustics are hard and you don't want to be wedded to a microphone, being able to project your voice for me requires me to start at a lower octave.
Can we hear the difference?
No.
Is it because the room is not big enough?
I have a microphone right in my face.
You're now making me feel like I should be speaking lower so that I can make sure that I don't end up too
You
high
already have a very low voice.
I do have a low voice, yeah. Switching a bit, outside of the law, have you found anything a hobby per se, where you've ended up with medals because you're also competitive.
After all the years of being a trial lawyer with no hobbies except working, I did 10 years ago find myself a hobby so I purchased an olive orchard, and my partner in life and love and business and I started making olive oil. And first we were doing that as a hobby, as a fun thing to do. And yes, because I am competitive, it turns out we now win awards, and we are just recently on a list of the top 20 most awarded olive oils in the world.
That's impressive. And I'm fortunate enough to have some of your olive oil upstairs.
I think you do have to do some sort of disclosure that you are an olive oil customer.
Yes, I am a customer. I've even been to the tasting room, which is a fantastic experience. You also have a TikTok for your olive oil that I understand is very well received.
I do, which still shocks me because I am, as you know, an incredibly private person in my personal life. I don't discuss a lot of my personal life, or I haven't. And TikTok is all about here you are. So I do that for the olive oil, and it's really actually been quite fun. And doing that business, making that into a business it's really interesting because when I first started, law takes all the energy sometimes. And I never thought I had time for a hobby. I thought reading, I read books, so that was a hobby. And someone told me that's not really a hobby. And I said, why are you so judgmental? But to have something that is creative, that is not the law, and to be, on a property, the farm is a really peaceful, beautiful place. It really helps me. It's a place I can think. It's a place I can go through strategy. I can get distance, and it fuels me in a creative way, in a strange way. And the TikTok is the same thing. It's a different type of storytelling, right? And it allows me to tell stories that are a little bit personal. And maybe there aren't the stakes, you don't have those stakes that you do in cases, but it is really an interesting way to, talk to strangers, and you are getting feedback, and different than getting a feedback from a jury at the end of a case. You're getting real-time feedback from people, almost instantaneous when you post something on social media like that. And it helps you. It makes you understand what people are interested in, how tastes change in a matter of days or weeks. So I have found it to be very interesting from, a storytelling perspective.
The olive oil is Bocabella Farms.
That is right.
And the TikTok handle?
Bocabella Farms.
And those who are interested in getting your olive oil, would they just search for that on the internet and be able to find it pretty easily?
Yes.
And if the order is being fulfilled, would you be packing it personally?
Probably. That's my meditation in the morning sometimes.
I asked that in part joking and in part real. One of the things that you seem to have adopted that is very honorable is your desire to do your absolute best in everything you do. And oftentimes that is you doing it yourself.
That is true. But I do want to say something very interesting happened when I started telling my colleagues, my lawyer friends, what I had done, right? And because we had other lawyers in our community, established older men who had done things like buy vineyards and buy jets and buy small islands and all these things.
Who bought a small island?
That's another podcast for a different day. And when you heard those stories in our community, we would all sit back and be like, oh, he made it. Like he's legit, he's serious. And the feedback I got was, oh, she must have checked out.
So she bought the farm.
She bought the farm. And I still get questions. Oh, so are you done with the law? And I think, what? Like, a girl can't get a hobby and still have a job these days. So it was sort of interesting that it wasn't received in the same way. And maybe I don't do it in the same way. Like, I've never treated the olive oil as a vanity project, right? It's not like someone else is making my olive oil. Like, my partner and I do the work because it's important and we love it. But it's not in place of the law, and law has not lost the importance for me. My clients are not, that hasn't changed. But I got myself a hobby.
I think there's a joke somewhere in there in terms of winemaking and how you make a small fortune in the winemaking business, which is
to start with a larger fortune
in the winemaking business. Yes. It's really neat, though, to see that you've taken what you call a hobby and turned it into such a successful business. It makes me wonder what's going to come next.
I don't know. We'll see.
Well, Shaana, I really want to thank you for taking the time to sit down with me.
Thank you, Miles. I really enjoyed it.
And thank you for listening today. Please email us at podcast@coopers.law with questions, comments, feedback, and suggestions for who we should have on the show. Like what you heard? Share us with a colleague and leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. To all of you doing justice out there, happy hunting.